Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump saying Iran has no plan for executions. That's amid fears over the fate of a detained anti-regime protester. This as the president's been weighing U.S. military intervention in Iran. Mario Tzu at the White House. A London-based news outlet says that over 12,000 people have been killed in Iran's protests. Meanwhile, the U.S. announces the beginning of Phase 2 of the Gaza Peace Plan. Jason Perry reports. The U.S. freezing all visa processing for 75 countries. Somalia, Russia, Iran, and Thailand among those affected. A victory for an Illinois congressman who sued the state over a voting law that counts ballots 14 days after the election. The Supreme Court said he has a right to challenge it. Arlene Richards has more on the case.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump saying he's been told by important sources that Iran has stopped killing anti-regime protesters. This comes amid fears over the fate of a detained anti-regime protester, and the president renewing his vow to acquire Greenland. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mario Tzu at the White House. Mari, good evening.
Tiff, good evening. That's right. And it's a slight, if momentary, posture shift from the president's escalating threats against the Iranian regime over the past few weeks. That's as anti-Iranian regime protests have grown, as has the regime's crackdown on protesters, with horrifying footage of body bags at Tehran's morgues, now showing us a glimpse of that bloody crackdown, as authorities have also blocked the internet off there since Thursday. And President Trump has in recent weeks said that help is on the way, at one point saying that the U.S. is locked and loaded and ready to go, urging protesters to keep protesting. On Monday, the U.S. State Department urged Americans to leave Iran, but now President Trump saying he's been told on, quote, good authority that the killing has stopped. Take a look.
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place, and we're going to find out.
This comes a day after President Trump warned of very strong action in response to reports of the regime hanging those detained during the protests. He says he's watching Iran as the Pentagon today withdraws some troops from a key base in Qatar, echoing a move taken before U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities back in June. Meanwhile, President Trump calling anything less than Greenland in the hands of the U.S. unacceptable, citing national security.
And the problem is, there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland. But there's everything we can do. I can't rely on Denmark being able to defend themselves. They put an extra dog sled there last month. They added a second dog sled. That's not going to do the trick.
This comes as Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio meet with the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland.
And we therefore still have a fundamental disagreement, but we also agree to disagree. And therefore we will, however, continue to talk. It is not a true narrative that we have, Chinese warships all around the place. According to our intelligence, we haven't had a Chinese warship in Greenland for a decade or so.
While top Danish officials say there are no Chinese ships near Greenland, major Chinese Communist Party media outlets echo these denials, alleging the U.S. is acting out of self-interest rather than national security. President Trump draws attention to a Danish intelligence report released last month that starkly warns about China's military goals in the Arctic.
If you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger.
Meanwhile, President Trump is announcing that what he calls a very bad leaker on Venezuela is now in jail. This is coming as the FBI searches the home of a Washington Post reporter as part of an investigation into a Pentagon contractor who allegedly leaked classified information that Attorney General Pam Bondi says posed a risk to the nation's national security. President Trump is also recently giving a readout of a call he had today with interim president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez. He says that they discussed oil, minerals, trade, and national security, and touts the partnership between Venezuela and the U.S. And tomorrow, the president's expected to meet with the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Machado, here at the White House. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. Disturbing numbers have been reported in Iran's protests. According to the London-based news channel Iran International, at least 12,000 people have been killed. And in another development, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff announces the beginning of Phase 2 of the Gaza Peace Plan. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
A mass funeral was held in Tehran on Wednesday for members of Iranian security forces who were killed during the protests. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency said over 140 people have been killed who are affiliated with the Iranian regime. A woman at the funeral procession shared her thoughts.
People who shoot others from their own country are not one of us. That's a foreign way of thinking. They should be identified through intelligence services of Iran and receive the death penalty.
However, members of the Iranian regime have been accused of shooting thousands of peaceful protesters in the country. According to the London-based news channel, Iran International said at least 12,000 people have now been killed in the protests. The news outlet said it reached the conclusion after receiving information from, but not limited to, sources in Iran's presidential office, data linked to hospitals, and information provided by nurses and doctors across the country. Iran's exiled prince, Reza Pahlavi, shared the same death toll in a recent interview on Fox News.
4 times the number of people who were dead as a result of the 9/11 terrorist attack.
We're trying to get our head around that. What is the number that
about 12,000 plus.
12,000 plus.
That's what we get so far. It might be more, but that's the minimum number that we know so far.
And the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency estimates that over 18,000 protesters have been detained. Iran's top judge implied that there will be fast trials and executions for those who have been detained in the nationwide protests. However, President Trump said on Wednesday that based on information he's received, he believes there is currently no plan for large-scale executions. And what happens if the Iranian regime falls? A former Iranian diplomat said it's possible for the country to slip into a state of chaos during a transfer of power.
Ordinary Iranian citizens have always been cognizant of the fact that they do not want to be in a situation that the people of Syria or Iraq, for example, found themselves in.
And speaking of a transfer of power, in a related development, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff announced the beginning of Phase 2 of the Gaza Peace Plan. He said Phase 2 will establish a transitional technocratic Palestinian administration in the Gaza Strip and the full disarmament of the Hamas terrorist group and other unauthorized personnel. He also called for Hamas to comply with its obligations and return the body of the final deceased hostage. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Lawmakers weigh in on the situation in Iran. The regime has reportedly killed thousands of protesters, and the Trump administration has warned it will take action against the regime. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on the story.
We stand in solidarity with the people of Iran who clearly want change after, 50 years of absolute disaster. Defer to the president and his capacity as commander-in-chief, and he and Secretary Rubio and their engagement with Iran and with our allies, and continue to put pressure on them. And
people are getting slaughtered, and you've got a regime that's been, all they do is export terrorism. And they've killed Americans. So I wait to see what the president does. Anything he does will be very strategic, and we'll just see what happens. I think he knows the Constitution and what he can do.
Well, I think he's a man of his word, and he said he's going to. I think we're positioning troops and assets, so I expect it sooner rather than later. The brutality that's we're hearing underground coming out of Iran is truly horrific.
Well, the president said that he was going to protect the protesters, and I certainly hope the Ayatollahs get the message, just like Maduro did not get it. So I am in favor of the protesters. Let them speak their mind.
Some House Democrats support the Trump administration putting pressure on the Iranian regime, but through diplomatic means.
We should work with our international partners and exert our leverage and pressure them to stop the violence. I'm glad to see that SpaceX is considering offering Starlink to people in Iran so they have internet access, but we should not be going to war.
Others have called on a war powers resolution to limit the president's powers to act militarily against the Iranian regime.
We need to have a war powers resolution that covers all of these situations. It is time for the United States Congress to retake its constitutional power and reestablish the balance, right? And don't get me wrong, this is not just about Donald Trump alone. This is a problem that has been 20 years in the making.
On the Senate side, Senator John Fetterman, the Democrat from Pennsylvania, has backed President Trump in the case that the Trump administration takes military action against the Iranian regime.
Have that poisonous regime now in spiral. So why wouldn't we want to support that and those brave protesters? I think we can all agree that the world would be better, safer, and more just if you could break that regime.
The U.S. government has begun evacuating personnel from the Al Udeid air base in Qatar, the closest military air base the U.S. has to Iran. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
As President Trump warns against the execution of protesters in Iran, what kind of message does this send to the Islamic terrorist regime? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the streets of D.C. to hear from the people.
President Trump is warning Iran against killing protesters, saying there will be severe consequences if they continue to do that. So what are your thoughts on that? What kind of message do you think this is sending to the Iranian regime?
I think the Iranian regime needs to know they can't just kill people because they don't agree with them. They can't hang people. They can't imprison them, take away their rights, take away their Wi-Fi. I think he needs to send that message.
Well, I'd like to think it's a wake-up call, but it's hard to say because they've already, from reports, have already executed at least 10,000, which is mind-boggling. So, it almost seems like empty words.
I don't like to see those people killed, and they have every right to protest, in my opinion. And if he has to go in and stop the government over there, then I understand.
Well, I would hope it sends a strong message because it's a brutal, horrible, terroristic regime that exports terror around the world and kills its own citizens for going out to protest.
What do you think about the possibility of a military intervention in Iran? President Trump hasn't really ruled that out yet.
I think military intervention is a very strong point to make. I think sometimes that's what you have to do.
Sometimes it's necessary to take that step. I mean, there's no other option, especially with what they're doing to the people who are there.
It's probably a good time for the regime to fall, but I think that's something they have to decide. We have a history, and it's not a good history, of being involved with regime change, so we probably need to let the people of Iran, the Iranians, handle it.
I favor strong action. I don't know that I favor actual American forces in Iran. Whatever we can do to help out those brave people that are putting their lives on the line by going out on the street, I'd be in favor of.
We don't want to see boots on the ground anywhere, really. But if that's what it has to be, I guess I agree with it.
The U.S. is pausing all visa processing for 75 countries, including Somalia, Russia, Nigeria, and Thailand. The pause on visas will begin January 21st and continue indefinitely. That's according to a memo from the State Department first obtained by Fox News. In the meantime, the department will reassess its screening and vetting procedures. The White House later posted the Fox News report. It's part of an effort to make sure the visa applicants don't become a public charge, meaning someone who relies on welfare. Other countries affected include Afghanistan, Brazil, Cuba, Colombia, Iran, Pakistan, and Syria. The change comes amid nationwide attention on alleged welfare fraud in Minnesota. Many of those accused are immigrants from Somalia. A majority of Supreme Court justices ruled that an Illinois congressman has a particular interest in a state election law and that he therefore has a constitutional right to challenge it. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Supreme Court said Wednesday that a congressman and other candidates for office could sue the state of Illinois over its mail-in voting law. The law allows for the counting of ballots received up to 14 days after Election Day. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing the opinion for the court, said the law could injure a candidate for office in several ways, like causing him to lose an election. Illinois Republican Congressman Mike Bost and two other political candidates had filed a lawsuit claiming the rule violated federal law. His attorney, Paul Clement, argued last October that counting those ballots is unlawful.
Those unlawful ballots could cost Congressman Bost the election or at least reduce his margin of victory, and he has to pay his campaign staff for 2 extra weeks.
The state of Illinois argued the case should be dismissed because the congressman didn't have standing to sue. The legal doctrine requires someone to show he's been individually injured by the law. They said he focused only on possible future harm.
Bost used the words if and may without any explanation when referring to the possibility of an election loss or reputational harm. These conclusory and incomplete statements describe the mere theoretical possibility of injury. They are not evidence of a substantial risk of harm.
Lower courts agreed with the state and dismissed the case. Chief Justice Roberts stated in the opinion that political candidates have a personal stake in the rules that govern the counting of votes, and therefore they have standing to challenge the rule. Justices Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor disagreed with the majority's opinion and said in a dissenting opinion that the congressman should have been required to show that he had in fact been harmed. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, the January 6th pipe bomb case is back in the spotlight. Some members of Congress say the FBI had enough evidence to make an arrest long ago and question whether the delay was due to more than just a lack of resources. At least 32 people killed after a construction crane fell onto a moving train in Thailand. Whether the tragedy has to do with China's Belt and Road Initiative. And House lawmakers highlight the importance of keeping ahead of the Chinese Communist Party's ambitious AI agenda. Jason Blair reports when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The pipe bomb case tied to the January 6th Capitol breach is under scrutiny once again on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers on the newly formed House Judiciary January 6th subcommittee are questioning why it took so long to arrest a suspect and whether there's more to the overall story. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
How did the previous FBI go 5 years without even a lead, using the exact same data? Is there political bias involved in the decision, or is it just a lower priority?
Back under the microscope, pipe bombs placed outside the Republican and Democrat National Committee headquarters in D.C. prior to the January 6, 2021 Capitol breach. On Capitol Hill on Wednesday, members of Congress probed why the case remained unsolved for over 4 years, while the FBI allegedly had enough information to make an arrest.
Under the Ray FBI, this case was allowed to languish. It started to lose energy over time. There was a split of resources. There was a split of attention. And what happened...
It looked like that happened within the first couple of months. Would that be standard at the FBI in a case of a pipe bomb being left outside the Republican National Committee headquarters and the Democrat National Committee headquarters? Does that make sense?
No, it's highly unusual, but they did have the larger events that happened on January 6th that they diverted attention, energy, resources to.
Brought in a new team of investigators and experts, re-examined every piece of evidence, sifted through all the data, something that the prior administration refused and failed to do. As a result of that, we generated numerous investigative leads.
Earlier this month, the Justice Department has since charged Brian Cole Jr. in the attempted bombings ahead of the January 6th Stop the Steal rally. Cole allegedly placed the bombs outside the DNC and RNC headquarters. Neither of them detonated. Later the next day, law enforcement responded to the discovery of the pipe bombs. The chairman of the committee says the timing of the discovery of the bombs was suspicious, as it was discovered while protesters were breaching the Capitol, thereby diverting officers.
The Capitol Police Chief had to split his team, sending significant resources to handle 2 pipe bomb incidents. The placement and timing of the pipe bombs discovery proved critical in blurring the lines between public space and restricted Capitol grounds, and therefore made it easier for protesters to enter the Capitol building on January 6.
As Congress will continue to hold such hearings, the suspect involved faces a maximum sentence of 20 years if convicted. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Tragedy in Thailand. At least 32 people have been killed after a construction crane fell onto a passenger train. The project is part of the Chinese regime's Belt and Road Initiative. Here's more.
Mangled carriages and hanging debris. This scene came from the site of a train derailment in Thailand on Wednesday. A construction crane fell onto traveling passenger carriages, killing at least 32 people and injuring another 66.
I heard the noises screeching and then bam, bam, bam all the way over there. When the dust settled, I saw the top of the train carriage.
The accident occurred in central Thailand, some 140 miles northeast of Bangkok. The train was traveling northeast from the capital with 195 people on board. The search for more bodies and possible survivors was ongoing. Thailand's prime minister visited the site of the disaster. He vowed to investigate the cause and compensate the victims.
We have always been concerned about safety, but I think we have to investigate whether they have done this in accordance with the design and methods of construction or not. But it's no matter what, it has already happened. So we need to make sure that we take care of every issue. Thank you very much. Intensively, yeah.
The construction crane was above the existing rail line. It was working on a high-speed rail project that aims to connect Bangkok with China via Laos. The $16 billion project is a key part of the Chinese regime's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. Construction began in 2017, but the segment within Thailand wouldn't be completed until 2030. Italian Thai Development was contracted to build that segment, and a Chinese company was responsible for design and construction supervision.
And each contract has its own working conditions and established safety supervision measures. The authorities will review whether any parties neglected or failed to carry out their assigned duties. If such negligence is found, legal action will be taken against those involved.
Italian Thai Development expressed regret for the accident and said it would provide compensation for families of victims. The same company was also involved in the construction of a 30-story building in Bangkok that collapsed last March following an earthquake.
In the House, both sides of the aisle express agreement that keeping ahead of China in the so-called AI arms race is crucial in all areas of national and economic security. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more from lawmakers on Capitol Hill.
Winning the AI arms race is key to America's national security and our economic security.
The House Foreign Affairs Committee held a full committee hearing on Wednesday, emphasizing the importance for the U.S. to stay ahead of the Chinese Communist Party with AI technology.
In an environment where it seems that Democrats and Republicans can't agree on much, there seems to be an overwhelming consensus that America must lead the AI race.
China sees us as the enemy. It's high time we do the same.
The outcome of this race, it directly affects military competitiveness of the United States of America versus China. It is that black and white.
I think all of us here, and I think most people at home, can recognize that no matter how you feel about AI, we want the United States to lead.
Expert witnesses were invited to share their expertise and recommendations.
Xi Jinping talked about AI in his New Year's address this year. He understands that this is a fulcrum, right? This is the pivotal technology that allows all these other technologies of the future and the near future. He sees this as so important that he is pulling out all the stops.
My primary message to the committee is this: advanced AI compute is essential to the AI era, enabling both economic dynamism and novel military capabilities. Denying our foreign adversaries access to this resource, then, is a matter of both geostrategic competition and national security.
And in the Senate chamber, the Senate Aging Committee highlighted the Chinese Communist Party's involvement in scams targeting American seniors.
Scams targeting seniors are stealing billions of dollars from hardworking Americans, and we here in Congress have a responsibility to confront them head on.
Scott says in 2024, older Americans lost over $4.8 billion to fraud.
Compounds built and staffed by trafficked workers forced to carry out scams targeting our friends, Americans. Not only is this a disgusting display of our national failures to protect human rights, dignity, and security, it's also another way Communist China is undermining our country and targeting the American people.
State-backed scamming has emerged from China, just like state-backed industrial espionage efforts. China plays a leading role in scams that originate both in China itself and outside in hotspots across Southeast Asia, for example.
Pekarsik says these efforts by the Chinese Communist Party are part of a broader approach to great power competition. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Coming up, people across the globe show support for demonstrators in Iran. Arian Pazdar has what people in different continents say about the protests and the role of Iran's Islamic regime. And as President Trump is set to meet with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado tomorrow, what does the future of the nation look like now that dictator Nicolas Maduro has been ousted? What would it take to rebuild? Venezuelan immigrant and founder of the Dissident Project, Daniel DiMartino, joins us to discuss when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. As the death toll in Iran keeps rising, people across the globe show support for the demonstrators in Iran. Current estimates indicate that as many as 12,000 people have died while protesting the Islamic regime. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest.
But I haven't been able to reach any of my family members or friends.
The owner of a cafe in New York City saying she's concerned that she can't reach her family in Iran because of the internet blackout in the country.
I can't think straight and I can't even work.
And she's far from the only Iranian abroad thinking about the situation in her home country. Protests in support of the people in Iran continue spreading across the globe. A demonstrator in Australia says he's making his voice heard so the people in Iran know they have international support.
My biggest regret is not being there in the street to support them.
Protesters in Germany raising awareness about the ongoing internet blackout in Iran.
Internet shut! Telephone shut!
A woman at the demonstration saying people can't take the brutal status quo in Iran anymore.
People are put under pressure. People are murdered in the streets if they oppose their government. People just want to live.
International leaders continue condemning the Iranian regime for the violence it is committing against its own people.
The contrast between the courage of the Iranian people and the brutality of their desperate regime has never been clearer.
The European Union is working to levy additional sanctions on Iran. President Trump recently announced he'd impose an additional 25% tariff on any country doing business with Iran. However, Russia says it will keep working with the Iranian regime.
I do not think that any third party can change the nature of Russian-Iranian relations. This relationship is based on agreements reached by the presidents of Russia and Iran.
He added that the relations between Russia and Iran serve both countries and will therefore continue. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
President Trump is expected to meet with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado tomorrow, according to a White House official. That's as the State Department says multiple Americans who were detained in Venezuela have been released. Joining us now is Daniel DiMartino. He's a fellow at Manhattan Institute and founder of the Dissident Project. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you. News is moving so fast right now, of course, with the attention focus on Iran. There's still a lot happening with Venezuela, though. Big picture first, as the founder of the Dissident Project, what are you hearing in terms of hope from people oppressed by regimes around the world? Is there a real sense of that now with President Trump in office?
Well, I do think that the president has created a lot of hope for people around the world because he has taken action, right? He actually bombed the Iranian nuclear facilities. He went into Venezuela and arrested the narco tyrant that was oppressing, the Venezuelan people. And Venezuelans are very happy about it. They're very hopeful. They're also scared because the regime is still in power, same as the Iranians, right? The Iranian regime is still in power, killing people. And I can tell you, every Iranian I've also met is interested in the president helping them and actually doing military strikes on the facilities. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the regimes will just fall because of mass protests and unpopularity. But the reality is that in these authoritarian countries, the population is unarmed and the armies are criminal organizations who are happy to kill thousands of people to remain in power. So there is actually no way to overthrow these regimes and turn these countries into prosperous American allies without external help.
And we saw President Trump on Sunday issue a warning to Cuba, actually, saying no more oil or money from Venezuela. How did that relationship work between Caracas and Havana? How are Cubans likely viewing all of this?
Yes, so the Cubans have been sending spies and military agents and protectors to Venezuela, which were actually one third of the deaths of the U.S. Capture of Maduro in Caracas were Cubans, Cuban soldiers who were in his presidential palace. And in exchange for the security and intelligence services, Cuba receives barrels upon barrels, hundreds of thousands a day from Venezuela for free that then they sell in the international market, and that's how they subsidize the regime. Cuba went through this period in the 90s called the special period between the fall of the Soviet Union when their Soviet subsidies ended and when Hugo Chavez rose and enacted socialism in Venezuela in 99. So they actually can survive for a period we know of 8 years without external subsidies. The problem with the period is that they just let the people starve. That's why it's called a special period. It's just a fancy word for starvation. So it's not enough to starve Cuba of the oil revenues with this embargo. We would actually need, and this is why I think a free Venezuela is so useful, because a free Venezuelan government would actually collaborate to liberate Cuba.
A lot to watch for there. Now, in terms of Venezuela, many point to it as an example of failed socialist policies. You actually have personal experience with this, having lived through the change. What was Venezuela like before socialism?
Venezuela was such a wonderful country. All my family was there. We had 2 cars. We had an apartment. Normal life, like many Americans. And then we didn't have water. And then we didn't have electricity very often. And then we had to line up for food. And that's the consequence of the government nationalizing businesses. It's the consequence of them putting price controls. It's the consequence of them printing money to pay for government spending, right? They cause hyperinflation, so your money loses all value. I had to carry big stacks of cash to buy anything, anywhere. Your ID for the rationing, you put your fingerprint in a scanning machine so the government tells you what you can buy. All of these problems continue to this day in Venezuela. The regime hasn't changed, which is why, Venezuelans are hopeful that Maduro is gone. But now the U.S. needs to force a transition. If not, we haven't really achieved anything yet.
Zooming out a bit first, besides countering threats from socialist and communist regimes here in the Western Hemisphere, President Trump's Don Roe doctrine, as he likes to say, seems to want to push out foreign influence from communist China especially. Do you see this as a campaign to root out Marxism in our hemisphere?
Absolutely. And what's important about Venezuela specifically is that Venezuela, because of the oil and the drug trafficking revenue, they use that to finance Marxist parties all over Latin America. That's how Gustavo Petro, the current president of Colombia, got elected. The Kirchnerists in Argentina, the opposition to Milei, the leftists, they were big friends and received money from Hugo Chavez. Lula in Brazil, the current president, who's a big enemy of President Trump. Even the Mexican government under Claudia Sheinbaum and her predecessor, all allies of the Venezuelan Maduro regime, and Evo Morales in Bolivia. So every single left-wing party in Latin America has been funded and aided by the Maduro regime, and now Delcy Rodriguez and her allies in Venezuela. And that's why rooting out Venezuela is going to be so wonderful for the region, not just for America or for Venezuela. And it's going to lead to, believe me, a lot of indictments and a lot of people in jail, because a lot of crooks, when Venezuela is a free country, we're going to reveal a lot of information of people who were taking Venezuelan money in order to act on their behalf, even in the United States.
I want to dig into that when it comes to, the Venezuelans themselves. When it comes to improving the economy and standard of living there in Venezuela, what do you see as the next steps for that?
Yeah, well, in the short run, we're going to see probably Chevron specifically, which is the only American oil company producing in Venezuela, increase its production just through efficiency gains and allowing new equipment going to Venezuela. The Venezuelan oil industry is the most inefficient in the world. They even burn their natural gas as a byproduct of oil extraction. So Venezuela is very bright from the night sky for a bad reason, because they waste natural gas. And so I think Chevron is going to be able to improve a lot of those processes. I think other American companies will go. But there's a limit, right? Oil production may rise from 1 million to the most optimistic scenario to 1.5 million barrels of oil in the next year and a half. However, Venezuela will not see its pre-socialism oil peak, which was 3.5 to 4 million barrels of oil a day, without a transition to capitalism and democracy, because oil companies are investing in the oil industry in a long run, right? They are not going to just invest for the next 3 years of the Trump administration. They know that after Trump is gone, if the regime is still in place, the regime is taking their business. So this is why a transition is so important, because it's the only way to actually increase oil production, increase investment in other sectors, and have America reaping the benefits of less drug trafficking and more oil exports.
Speaking of transitions, Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado is visiting the White House tomorrow. What are you watching for in that meeting?
Well, I think we should watch to see a few things. Number one, will it be in the Oval Office? Will the president and her make a joint statement? Will she only make a statement, or will he only make a statement, right? Who will be in that meeting? Will it only be the president and the Secretary of State and her? So these are all important factors. Will the Secretary of State make a statement? I expect him to, but you never know. So all of these things matter. I think it also matters what he says. Will they announce new sort of transition steps, or is this just an initial meeting? And then finally, where will she go after this? Is she going to stay in the United States for some time? Will there be a plan like the Secretary of State already laid out for her to go back to Venezuela soon? These are the things that I'm looking for.
Well, Daniel DiMartino, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, great to see you again.
And in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills are suddenly short on healthy receivers while preparing for the league's second-ranked defense. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Saks Global, parent company of Saks Fifth Avenue, is seeking bankruptcy protection. The move has cast uncertainty over the future of U.S. luxury fashion barely a year after a takeover that brought Saks Fifth Avenue, Bergdorf Goodman, and Neiman Marcus under the same roof. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
High-end department store conglomerate Saks Global filed for bankruptcy protection late on Tuesday in one of the largest retail collapses since the pandemic.
I've shopped at Saks. My wife shops at Saks. My mother shopped at Saks. My grandmother shopped at Saks.
There are two profiles of customers that we need to keep in mind. One is the luxury customer and one is the discount customer. Saks Global not only owns their luxury department stores where, frankly, the luxury customers have spoken really loudly that they can shop elsewhere, which is why we're in this situation. There are also customers that shop in the outlet stores off Saks Fifth Avenue. And initially, they're going to be really excited because they're going to see more merchandise in their stores. They're going to see liquidations. Long term, they're going to see those stores close and less opportunity. Saks Global will contract because they will be exiting the discount space as they attempt to shore up their debt.
Saks Fifth Avenue, an affiliate of Saks Global, listed $1 billion to $10 billion in assets and liabilities, according to court documents filed in U.S. bankruptcy court in Houston, Texas.
Saks made a decision to solve their market share issue by acquisition. The unfortunate thing is that they acquired Neiman Marcus, who was buried under debt. When you yourself as a business are in a significant debt situation, the last thing that you want to do is acquire more debt. And so what they did is they did that and then they didn't have a plan. So businesses that are looking for acquisition, my best recommendation for you is do it from a position of strength. You know your model is working well and you're acquiring a business that can move into your model and accelerate your growth long term.
When Saks said that it would buy Neiman Marcus for $2.65 billion in the summer of 2024, the goal was to create a powerhouse in a luxury sector that had grown more fragmented. But the entanglement with Neiman Marcus only worsened Saks' debt situation as luxury sales weakened.
Personality. It has a personality. It has a history. It has a value. The things that they present are beautiful and thoughtful, and they still have that.
Saks Global said the new financing deal would provide an immediate cash infusion of $1 billion through a debtor-in-possession loan from an investor group. Financing worth $240 million would be available through an asset-backed loan provided by the company's asset-based lenders. The luxury retailer will have access to $500 million of financing from the investor group once it successfully exits bankruptcy protection, expected later this year. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on. We have baseball, basketball, and some golf news. But let's start in the NFL as the Buffalo Bills announced yesterday they lost 2 receivers in Sunday's win, both suffering torn ACLs. Who does that leave them with?
Not much, Tip. A big void, probably a big headache for the head coach, that's for sure. I mean, it's the 2 receivers who suffered torn ACLs Sunday, Terrell Shavers and Gabe Davis. Now, amazingly, Shavers suffered the injury in the first half, still somehow played in the second half. Pretty incredible there. Now, in addition to those 2, the week before, they put fellow receiver Joshua Palmer on the injured reserve with an ankle injury. So that leaves them with just 3 healthy receivers right now. It's Brandon Cooks, Khalil Shakir, and Keon Coleman. Now, they might get back veteran receiver Curtis Samuel, whom they just activated off of injured reserve yesterday, and he did practice. That could be a good sign for this Saturday. Now, other than that, they may have to add maybe someone from their practice squad. We'll have to see here. Now, meanwhile, their opponent Saturday, the Denver Broncos. Now, they had the number 2 ranked defense in the NFL this past season. Only Houston allowed fewer yards per game, and we saw what Houston did to Pittsburgh Monday night. That was pretty ugly there. So not a great situation for Buffalo to be in, but it could be worse.
All right, let's leave it at that. Shifting gears to golf, though, Live Golf announced they've re-signed former PGA star Dustin Johnson to a multi-year extension. Do you think this is in response to Brooke Koepka's recent decision to return to the PGA?
You know, at first I actually thought it was, but the program that allowed Koepka to return, that was the returning members program, it was called, only allowed for former PGA members who've been away for 2 years and have won either a Players' Championship or one of the 4 majors since 2022. So the criteria were very specific. Now, Dustin Johnson's close, but he hasn't won a major actually since 2020, so he wouldn't qualify. In fact, besides Koepka, only 3 other golfers qualified based on those criteria. That's Bryson DeChambeau, Cameron Smith, and John Rahm. But those 3 announced yesterday that they were sticking with Live Golf and would not be following Koepka back to the PGA, and that window of opportunity here closes on February 2nd for the PGA to welcome them back. Now, if you remember, Koepka paid quite a hefty price to return, really forfeiting a lot here. He forfeited any equity shares for the next 5 years, while also not being eligible for the $100 million pool that is the FedEx Cup Championship. Plus, he actually had to make a $5 million to a donation. Now, all told, that's probably more than $50 million in giving up in forfeitures there to return to the PGA. So I guess that whole PGA Live merger that was supposed to happen a couple of years ago just is not going anywhere. So this is what they're resorting to, it seems like.
And it's hitting people in the pocketbook.
A new tug of war.
Well, looking at baseball news, the Boston Red Sox have reportedly agreed to a 5-year contract with free agent pitcher Ranger Suarez.
Yeah, Suarez was an all-star pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2024. He was arguably even better this past year, going 12-8 with a 3.20 ERA in 26 starts. That was good for nearly 5 wins above replacement. All very good numbers for a starter. Now, this deal is reportedly for 5 years worth $130 million. That's according to multiple reports. It certainly makes sense for Boston. They came into this offseason needing more starting pitching. They already traded for Sonny Gray from the Cardinals, and now it looks like they will be signing Ranger Suarez. I would think the next order of business now for Boston is going to have to be finding a new replacement for third base after Alex Bregman reportedly left for the Chicago Cubs over the weekend. Now, other than Bo Bichette, though, it's hard to see any obvious answers in free agency. So I'm not quite sure what to expect next, but I think Boston's still got some more work to do here.
All right, well, you'll be busy watching that. Moving to NBA news, though, yesterday we discussed the injury to Anthony Davis and ESPN's report that he would miss the rest of the season after having surgery. Do we have any updates on this?
Yeah, about 2 minutes after we talked about this last night, Tiff, Davis's team, that's the Dallas Mavericks, announced he would not be having surgery on his injured hand. They said he would. They think he could be healed in about 6 weeks without going through surgery. So that would target a late February date for him to return, which would be well before the season ends, which is mid-April for those teams who are not in the playoffs. And right now, Dallas is not heading toward the playoffs the way their record is. Now, Davis was injured last Thursday against Utah. Now, he's a 10-time All-Star center, but he's missed already 20 of the team's 40 games this season. He's been a difference maker in those 20 games. The team is 10-10 with him on the court, just 5-15 in the games without him. And they played tonight against Denver. Meanwhile, Denver is out without their all-star center in Nikola Jokic. But that's one of 7 games on tonight, Tiff. So in case you're looking for something to do, you can watch a game between two teams who don't have their all-star centers anymore, all right?
We'll see how the teams play.
Yeah, it might be a late game, though, out west. So you could be up late.
Or you can be up very early.
There you go. I'll get up at midnight.
Hey, it's a new day. Anyway, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.